Thanks for listening to our daily podcast. If you love what you're hearing and you want more, you can get all 3 daily hours ad-free and on demand for less than $3 per month. Go to michaelmedved.com and subscribe today. We have a special deal right now, 50% off an annual membership. Our program covers all the current controversies in the news with my independent and uncensored views. Become a MedHead member today. Find out more at michaelmedved.com. That's michaelmedved.com.
And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. It is a great nation. It is a great day, despite the fact that there are reports that indicate the world is on fire. Iran, Venezuela, Minneapolis, and Greenland. God, Greenland? Really? 56,000 people in this island, which is 3 times the size of Texas, and it's on fire? Over what? We will get to that, but before we do, and before we get started, please subscribe. It's free to our YouTube channel, and you will have access to everything that we have coming up today, including a terrific new movie, which is just released, and Paul Kengor of Grove City College talking a little bit about Latin American losers and what gives them that status. President Trump is breaking news, saying that he may impose tariffs on countries if they don't go along with Greenland. What does he mean with go along with Greenland? Is Greenland trying to impose its will on the world at large with its 56,000 people in their population? No, he says going along with Greenland for President Trump means we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. In other words, impose tariffs on countries who don't support the United States conquering, taking over, coming to dominate and to own the part of Denmark that has been part of Denmark for 300 years, known as Greenland. The comments came as the Supreme Court could soon deliver its ruling on the legality of Trump's reciprocal and fentanyl-related tariffs. This is actually one of those decisions by the Supreme Court that I think the majority opinion of legal observers is, despite the fact that Trump has appointed 3 of the justices on that court, this may not work for the president. Meanwhile, there's this. This is the Wall Street Journal this morning. And it's incredible. I've never seen anything quite like it. The top headline beneath the Wall Street Journal title page says, Europe reinforces Greenland to deter the U.S. And then they have a picture of sort of a snowy seascape with a little church down below and a military watercraft up on top, and it says, no thaw. U.S. NATO allies, including France, Sweden, and Germany, are building up military and diplomatic assets on the Arctic island of Greenland, a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, above a Royal Danish Navy vessel patrols near Nuuk on yesterday. Okay. This is when they say they are reinforcing Greenland to deter U.S. To deter the U.S. from what? From a military attack on Greenland? We were talking to Richard Pipes yesterday, and Daniel Pipes we were speaking to yesterday. And the whole idea of an invasion of Greenland by the United States is insane. It's not just a bad idea. It's a self-destructive idea. It's like taking off all your clothes and then walking out and on the biggest freeway you can find and standing there until a car runs you down, or a whole series of cars, or a semi-truck. I mean, this is nuts. It is deeply nuts. But there's more. There is a new poll that finds Trump is struggling to prove that he is actually successfully addressing the cost of living. Now, there's a $3 menu that is being put out by the Agriculture Department that says that it can show you that you don't have to spend too much on groceries. What does that $3 menu include? We will reveal that to you. Let me indicate, even if you're Robert Kennedy Jr., the items on this menu, this is not an appealing alternative for the United States, but we will get to it. There's also from CNN, tensions flared in Minneapolis again yesterday in the wake of a second shooting by a federal immigration officer in just over a week. President Trump responded by threatening to invoke the centuries-old Insurrection Act. It goes back originally to 1792, and then it was revised in 1807. That's what we're talking about. Something more than 200 years old, well more than 200 years old. The Insurrection Act would allow the deployment of U.S. troops to Minnesota. That's what we need, right? The White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, said it is a tool at the president's disposal. Disposal is probably a good idea. Yes, dispose it. And Trump's warning spoke very loud and clear to Democrats across the country. That is what Carolyn Leavitt said. So, in other words, the Insurrection Act would only apply to Democrats across the country. The Republicans and people in the middle would not be impacted, if you're not a Democrat, by an effort basically to have more military troops enforcing immigration laws all across the country. The president previously threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act in response to anti-ICE protests in Portland, Oregon last fall. And in 2020, he threatened to use the act to quell protests after George Floyd was killed. Notice that all the protests are taking place and during his terms. His term's first service in 2017 to 2021. And now this time, too. This is one of those things that's going to be very tough to blame on Joe Biden, though I'm sure there will be an attempt to do that. Meanwhile, Venezuela's opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, visited the White House and had a very wonderful house gift to offer to President Trump. She came there with her Nobel Peace Prize medal, and during a meeting at the White House yesterday, and Trump has long coveted the award and has been very obvious and direct about it. And though the Nobel Committee has been clear that it cannot be shared or transferred, well, that would be kind of an obvious thing. You go through a process deciding who gets the award, and you don't say, oh, I don't really care about this whole thing. I'll give it to my buddy, Donald J. Right? That's not going to work. Trump apparently gave Machado a gift bag embossed with his signature, "Oh, be still my heart," and issued a broad statement of his support for a new, genuine electoral process in Venezuela. Machado is seeking Trump's endorsement to become Venezuela's next president following the ouster of Nicolas Maduro. It wasn't just an ouster. He got arrested and is in custody now back here in the United States. Trump has publicly expressed doubt, however, about Maria Corina Machado's ability to govern in Venezuela. And he's listed in Wikipedia, at least, as the current president. Meanwhile, the Norwegian Nobel Committee released a statement on this question about giving away the Nobel Prize. We'll get to that and more coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, President Trump seems to have been gratified by receiving as a gift from the visitor Machado, Maria Corina Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. She visited President Trump at the White House, who believes that he should have been the Nobel Peace Prize winner, but she presented him with half of her award. Now, what that means exactly, I don't believe that it means he's receiving some of the money that is attached to the Nobel Peace Prize, but he did receive some of the honor, and he had a broad smile when he was holding up part of the medal that was given to her by the Nobel Committee. But the Nobel Committee doesn't think this is such a great idea. The Norwegian Nobel Committee released a statement saying once a Nobel Prize is announced, it cannot be revoked, it cannot be shared, or transferred to others. The decision is final and stands for all time. A medal can change owners, but the title of a Nobel Peace Prize laureate cannot. Okay, so he can't call himself a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Anyone want to take bets on the idea that he's going to follow that instruction and avoid calling himself a Nobel Peace Prize winner? I think it's very likely that he will claim that title. Meanwhile, the other area where President Trump has not figured out the right policy yet for bringing peace has to do with the horrible, nightmarish, corrupt, dangerous, genocidal regime in Tehran, in Iran. And there are reports now that Tehran is beginning to show signs of a return to normalcy. Now, normally when you hear about a return to normalcy, that's a good thing. But normalcy is so appalling and so dangerous in Tehran that it's not a good thing. They're showing signs of a return to normalcy after weeks of deadly anti-government demonstrations. It's not the demonstrations that were deadly, it's the government's response that was deadly. But some Iranians say they are still bracing for possible U.S. intervention. President Trump hasn't taken any options off the table, and the White House said that there will be, quote, grave consequences if killings continue. The U.S. military is also moving a carrier strike group to the Middle East region, I believe the USS Lincoln, and this is all amid the tension, according to a source. At least 2,400 protesters have been killed so far since the start of Iran's crackdown on dissent, according to a U.S.-based rights group. And a week-long communications blackout is still in place. Meanwhile, there was a terrific statement by Adam Smith, and Adam Smith is the ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. He is an expert on national defense and somebody who defines, it seems to me, the sane and viable middle on defense issues. He released the following statement regarding the protests in Iran. Quote, the Iranian regime is violently cracking down on its own people. Security forces are killing protesters, carrying out mass arrests, and attempting to silence dissent through fear and brutality and state-imposed communications blackout. This is not public order, it is repression. For decades, writes Adam Smith, the congressman from the state of Washington, the Iranian regime has failed its people. denying them basic freedoms, economic opportunity, and a voice in their own future. Iranians have made clear that they want dignity, accountability, and the ability to live without fear. The regime's response has been violence and bloodshed. The courage of those risking their safety to demand a better future deserves global attention. I stand with the Iranian people, says Congressman Adam Smith, and condemn the regime's response to protesters in the strongest terms. The Iranian people's voices must not be silenced. The Hill is also reporting, and the same story is also featured in the New York Times, that they have gotten voices in Washington from an unexpected source against the U.S. getting directly involved in a military confrontation with Iran. The Hill reported that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked Trump to postpone any attack on Iran. That request came in yesterday. The Arab nations of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Oman, all parts of the Abraham Accords, have also been pressing the Trump administration not to attack Iran, warning it could lead to a larger conflict, multiple outlets reported. As a sign of cooling tensions, the U.S. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar lowered its security alert after it was heightened the day before. Reuters reported the military had ordered a precautionary partial evacuation at the key U.S. military base this week. And also from the Hill, Trump announced that the Board of Peace, which has a very distinguished chairman, the chairman is Donald Trump, will oversee Gaza as part of his peace plan, and that board has now been formed, with the members being announced shortly. Can't wait. If Kid Rock going to be part of the Board of Peace? Anything is possible. It came a day after the administration launched the second phase of that deal. Coming up, a trip to Denmark, a bipartisan group of lawmakers is visiting Denmark and meeting with officials today amid Trump's ongoing rhetoric about taking the Danish territory, Greenland. The group that is heading to Scandinavia includes Senators Chris Coons of Delaware, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Dick Durbin of Illinois, and Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat of New Hampshire, along with members of the House, Gregory Meeks of New York, Madeline Dean of Pennsylvania, and Sarah Jacobs of California. So what are they going to figure out? How are they going to figure out Greenland? They haven't figured out Minneapolis yet. We will get to that and to the latest on the actors of Minneapolis. That's the name of a Wall Street Journal editorial, which we'll be getting to coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, the Wall Street Journal, despite the fact that it is not officially MAGA, remains a leading conservative voice here in the United States, certainly along with National Review, for instance. It is among journals, among publications, one of the most authoritative visions of the Republican conservative outlook. And they have an editorial today. It's from the editorial board under the heading The Insurrection Actors of Minneapolis. And they write persuasively, it seems to me, in better times with better political leaders, the tragic shooting of Renee Good in the fight over immigration and customs enforcement to de-escalate and to try to calm the furies. Instead, both sides are courting more confrontation that could end in even more bloodshed. Mr. Trump's latest move yesterday was to threaten to invoke the Insurrection Act to quell protests in the Twin Cities. He has the authority to do so, this under the Insurrection Act of 1807, which means he could call on the military to restore public order. But events in Minnesota are so far nowhere near the standard for riots and destruction that would justify such a move. George H.W. Bush invoked this law in 1992 to put down the riots in Los Angeles. That was the riots that were based upon the episode of Rodney King, if you remember. And being in Los Angeles at that time, yes, it was extraordinary. There was a big part of the city that was on fire, and the police locally and local law enforcement had lost all control. That is not the situation in Minneapolis, not at all. As they point out in the Wall Street Journal, in Minneapolis, the protests are largely peaceful, marred by some individual acts of obstruction or violence against ICE agents. These can be met with arrests and prosecutions case by case, which ICE and other agents seem capable of handling. Triggering the Insurrection Act might be White House aide Stephen Miller's fondest wish, or so it seems, but it could incite more protests, and it might cause more voters to wonder why the country is so unhappy in the second Trump term. It would surely motivate more Democrats to vote in November unless there is a broad threat to public safety that law enforcement simply cannot handle. Yet there is no denying that some ICE opponents seem eager to incite agents into a belligerent response. They are taunting ICE agents in the street, recording them on their phones, and often using their own SUVs to obstruct ICE vehicles. Obstructing a federal officer in the course of doing his duty is illegal, and it deserves to be prosecuted. Acts of civil disobedience have a long and sometimes noble history, but the actors must also face the legal consequences. All right, fair enough. But then they conclude that we believe that Mr. Trump's policy of mass deportation is unwise. I mean, it's not only unwise, it's devastating to any sense of national unity or purpose or a common interests. We believe Mr. Trump's policy of mass deportation is unwise, writes the Journal. Targeting criminal migrants has popular support for obvious reasons, but too often his ICE sweeps are catching otherwise law-abiding migrants who are awaiting their asylum hearing or have been in the U.S. for years. The average residence of a undocumented immigrant in this country is more than 10 years. More than 10 years. We believe Mr. Trump's policy of mass deportation is unwise. Targeting criminal migrants, everyone agrees on that, has popular support and obvious reasons. But too often his ICE sweeps are catching otherwise law-abiding migrants who are awaiting their asylum hearings or have been in the U.S., as we pointed out, for years. When Stephen Miller set his target for ICE of 3,000 migrant arrests per day, he set in motion enforcement that was bound to result in overkill and family breakups. Americans dislike it when the police have to meet parking ticket quotas, much less body counts for arrests. The president has the legal authority to unleash ICE, and the agents are doing what they are told to do. The way to defeat the Trump policy is at the ballot box, not by obstructing ICE agents in violation of the law. There's an election in 9 months. And will that election vote for more of what is going on in right now in the Twin Cities or in the state of Minnesota, which actually has one of the lowest crime rates of any state in the country? And by the way, how does this play in to Greenland? Because what you're talking about is a totally unnecessary kind of conflict in both cases. If President Trump would revert to what he originally promised in terms of the ICE sweeps, which is first we're going to go after all of the criminals. We're going to go after all the people with a record of violence or property crimes or criminal records, not just somebody who has come to the United States and set up a little business or is working in a factory somewhere. This is not what people voted for. They certainly didn't vote for the attacks on law-abiding citizens, American citizens, who are not illegal immigrants. There was a family of that nature with 6 children, including a 6-month-old, that were hit by a flash bang grenade sent out by ICE. This was 2 days ago. It's all extraordinary, and it's too much for the country. There is out there some wild assertions about the United States and our power and need to exert it, particularly over the Western Hemisphere, particularly over nations in Central and South America. We will get to that. It is a highly controversial proposition. And one of the United States senators, a Democrat, alleging that the president is, not insane, but he is being an idiot. Why and on what? Is that senatorial language? We will get to that coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, there is a great deal of controversy, to say the least, about foreign affairs. And one of the suspicions that I think that this observer has developed, and particularly in conversations with my wife, who gets upset sometimes by some of the news. But one of the things that I tried to put forward to comfort her is that President Trump knows a few things about politics very reliably. And one of the points that he has understood in all of his 3 races for president is that the key issues almost always are not foreign policy issues. They're about domestic policy. They're about, yes, the price of groceries, which President Trump talked about a great deal in his last campaign. They're about inflation. They're about the general sense that things are going well in the United States or they're not going well in the United States. And it seems to me that part of what President Trump is doing with the strike on Venezuela and with the hesitation and the back and forth on Iran, and above all, with the insane and groundless basis that he loves to bring up about taking possession of Greenland and the confrontation with Denmark. Now, all of this has gotten so much attention, including the situation in Minneapolis, that the basic issues on which Trump is going to lose the upcoming, I think very likely, the upcoming midterm elections has to do with basically the idea of things falling apart where you can blame that on some kind of enemy. And the enemy that he wants to blame it on is, quote, domestic terrorists in Minneapolis, to Europeans. And this was an interesting commentary that we got into yesterday, which is the idea that President Trump may not have a particular animus towards Scandinavian nations, but he does have a great sense of negativity, which came out in the most recent statement about U.S. foreign policy prepared by the State Department, that Europe deserves less attention and we need to offer more attention now to Latin America and to the Western Hemisphere in particular. And for instance, there was this explosive idea of a foreign policy blowing up with a CNN panel after Brianna Lyman, who's a conservative, she's a reporter at The Federalist, said that every country in the Western Hemisphere, that includes big countries like Brazil and Argentina and Chile and more, exists at the United States' pleasure. This is what it sounded like on air on CNN. This is clip 12.
Is Scott right that we're not calling the shots, or is Trump right that we're calling the shots?
Well, I think Scott's right. I think, first of all, and whether or not people at this table want to believe it, every country in the Western Hemisphere does exist at our pleasure because we are the superpower. Whether you don't believe it. And wait, when it comes to Venezuela right now, to Scott's point, you can't
just to be clear, you're saying every country in the hemisphere because we want them to exist.
No, not because we want them.
What are we saying?
It exists at our pleasure. So, for example, can I explain? When Venezuela is cozying up to Putin and China, President Trump is well within his right because we are the dominant force in the Western Hemisphere.
Okay, yeah, Trump is cozying up to Putin and China as well, or at least trying to. The discussion about foreign policy, which has occupied so much of our attention, takes the focus away from the domestic policy and the economic policy, where Trump is increasingly unpopular. And could this be part of a political ploy to get people involved with going to war against our NATO allies over Greenland? That's a pretty serious matter. But at least it takes the focus away from, and also takes the focus away from the Epstein files, which still, at least according to the polling, are a concern to many Americans. And this idea of shifting to foreign policy, and particularly a foreign policy that is nuts, well, maybe it's part of a deliberate strategy of some kind. Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona was on MS Now and indicating why he doesn't buy the notion that national security demands that we have a challenge to our NATO alliance by seizing control of Greenland. Here is Senator Gallego, clip 9.
Is there a way to address the president's security concerns without handing over Greenland that both sides might support?
No, because this has nothing to do with actual security concerns. This is the president being an idiot. And he is really excited about the idea of taking this big piece of land that's on a map. And he's just using any excuse to actually cover up his idiotic idea. And then you have people like, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. They're coming up with all these weird excuses. We have access to Greenland. We have a base in Greenland. The Kingdom of Denmark has said you could expand all the bases you want. They have agreed to work with us on economic issues. They've agreed to any type of economic treaty to secure mineral rights, whatever it is. They'll do anything because they certainly don't want to work. But this is just a fit of fancy this president is having. And then all his court jesters around him are coming up with an excuse because the real reason is really dumb. It's just the president is an idiot. And we're all trying to come up with excuses. But the fact is, at the core base, this president is an idiot. And now he's putting that foreign policy into effect, which is going to negatively affect us in the long run in terms of our national security.
Okay, when you look at the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and it has a picture of Danish Navy ships being placed into line to protect Greenland against a potential American attack. Yeah, this goes back to the David French article that we were talking about yesterday with David French, where he borrows a line from William Shakespeare and says something is rotten in the state of America. Of course, what Shakespeare was saying in Hamlet was something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Denmark's doing fine. And again, considering the attempt by the United States to terrify the Danes and to get them to give up their patrimony, what they have basically inherited from 300 years of Danish history, it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And again, since 1951, we've had a treaty that gives us a great rights to build bases and to see to our national security concerns, and including rights to some of the mineral depth that we apparently want to realize out of Greenland. The idea that Greenland is suddenly a concern because we believe it is somehow vulnerable to a takeover by Russia or China. Well, the way to deal with that is to provide Greenland with more military resources and more U.S. help in its defense, not by threatening Greenland with a U.S. attack. Isn't that fairly obvious? Does anyone get really helped by a U.S. attack on Greenland other than China and Russia and our rivals and enemies, adversaries around the world? Coming up, we're going to be talking about the idea of a coming global catastrophe and an ongoing catastrophe in terms of domestic policy with the ice confrontations persisting in Minnesota. That and more in This Greatest Nation on God's Green Earth.